A very warm welcome, everyone. I am delighted to have Sara Roberts with us today, who is the founder of Healthy Nibbles. Her business has gone from strength to strength over the last few years. And I think the last time we had a conversation was when you were telling us about the incredible pivot and change that you'd had to make to your business model as a result of the dreaded COVID, which has now very much become a part of our lives, I think. But Sara, it is such an honor to have you here with us today as part of our WomenLed Wonder series. Thank you very much for making the time.
No worries. Thank you for inviting me. It's really good to be back.
Brilliant. And I'm really excited to hear about all of the changes. It seems that you have literally been progressing in all spheres, not only in terms of your multi-channel approach now, which I'd love to hear more about, but also in terms of your sustainability efforts, which I think are incredibly admirable, but I also know would have come with a lot of effort. So it will be wonderful for you to, through our kind of conversation today, share some insights into that and your approach to sustainability in terms of how you run your business and the accreditations you've received. So I would like to start first by handing over to you to tell us a little bit about Healthy Nibbles and your why, your purpose.
Yes, certainly. So my purpose, I'm coming to know, has actually been wrapped up in so many different sort of life experiences. So many of you'll know I had 10 years living in Africa before coming over here, and just saw a massive juxtaposition between wealthy and poverty in a more pronounced way than we necessarily experience over here. And I think that was an initial trigger. When I came over here, I wanted to have a business of purpose. I wanted to be able to impact the lives around me, and not just the customers, but our employees, our supply chain, that sort of wider element. And that was long before, shall we say, ESG and sustainability was trendy. It was just something that was really inbuilt within me. The business story really feeds into our why, which was my dad was terminally ill. I was in a hospital with him and went to a vending machine in the middle of the night and found the usual culprits. And next to it, a giant poster saying diabetes and obesity kill. And again, there was that huge juxtaposition between we're supposed to be looking after people, but actually we're not giving them the tools to do that. So that was my initial why. Then it became a bit more personal. I could don't drink, don't smoke, but I could clear out hotel chocolat. So I wanted to find a way to actually eat healthily, enjoy what I was doing, but also cut down on the sugar. So taste and healthy and accessibility were all really key drivers for me. When we started, which seems so long ago now, we just really put health food in a vending machine. That was it. And we thought that was really cool. Where we actually are now is completely different. We're actually divided up into sort of 4 key areas. So we've got our sort of tech retail, shall we say, so cafes you can walk into where there's no people, you basically just autonomous cafes that sit within workplaces. We've got the vending, so that's that element. We have got snack boxes and gifting, really driven by sustainability and expanded beyond the food offering into sustainable items that really delight customers depending on where they are and what they're doing. Education experience, because we feel that is very much goes hand in hand with wellness. We all need the accessibility to the food as much as we need the education, and without one or the other it doesn't seem to work. And then we've just recently launched insights as a service, so that's really looking at what our customers are doing in different areas and how the health and wellness industry is changing. So we're very early stage on that, but it's growing and evolving. And yeah, that's
So
the
exciting.
why. The why, there's lots of other whys in there around the sustainability and the health. And you know, we've got over 60% of us are overweight or obese in the UK. In a new why, which is very cool for us, is around food waste in businesses. So food waste accounts for nearly 40% of all in businesses. Sorry, business food waste accounts for nearly 40% of all the UK food waste. So by our autonomous cafes, we can pretty much eliminate that because it's all data driven. So that's a new why. So our whys keep evolving as the business evolves, which is great.
And can you tell us a bit about the data driven side of that? Because I think that's really interesting. And certainly, I mean, from what I know of the industry, your point of difference. How does that work? What does it mean to have vending machines or autonomous cafes that are data driven?
So we've got a range of everything from fresh, frozen meals to the snacks and drinks. And we can put out a selection, and what we know immediately is what is actually being sold, when it's being sold, times of day that it's being sold at. That is not game changing in any way in terms of just seeing the consumption patterns, but where we're finding sort of that interesting levels is when we overlay that with who's actually coming through the workplace or who's coming through, say, Transport for London. And because it's giving us real-time insights, what we're seeing is, if, for instance, and it's really important, I think, at the moment with hybrid working, and that is definitely the way that we're heading, you have real serious ebbs and flows of building occupancy. You know, 1 minute it's absolutely heaving, then the next minute there's nobody there and it's a 2,000 person building. So what we're tracking is we're tracking that sort of ebbs and flows of that, and then overlaying it with our data in terms of purchasing and consumption patterns. So we're getting that predictive analysis of what is going to be consumed and when it's going to be consumed, in terms of the actual physical times of day, days of the week. But then we're also seeing popularity of products and which products are selling and which aren't. So we're able to stock more of the ones that are and get rid of the ones that aren't, and sort of really constantly evolve that so that we're essentially being able to eliminate that sort of food waste, but also to make sure that it's an experience for employees, because at the end of the day, employees still want to be able to go to the building. You know, companies are still trying to drive people to the building for the connection element and the culture element. So when they get there, they want actually something to be served with. And that's essentially what we're using the information for. And all of those systems are essentially connected into a single hub for us in terms of providing that real-time insight.
Well, and I mean, I think what's so amazing about that is that it's problem solving, but kind of in real time, because this way that we work and the way that, you know, companies have had to restructure the workday for their employees, you know, from a hybrid perspective, that you're able to provide those solutions and problem solve for them as they are facing these challenges and navigating them, which I think is, from an agility perspective, amazing. And I mean, I just was listening earlier to what you were saying about, you know, your multi-channel approach and all of the different models that you now have. How have you developed the bandwidth for that? I mean, from a growth perspective.
Not taking on board the wellness in terms of time out.
Oh, yeah.
No, it has its downsides. I think for me, looking at the business, the die line, we center ourselves around enabling healthier choices. So when there's an opportunity that presents itself, we say, does it do that? And for the insights, basically the insights experience and the product for us is like this at the moment, is like this circle. So the insights provides what products we want. We've got the education, so then there's products, and it just keeps going around. I think ultimately we're driven by this enabling healthier choices. And if it does that, then that's great. It is with caution. We don't take every opportunity. There's so many opportunities that we could take. We are currently going through a fundraising round to get more people on for exactly that reason, because we do need to amp up the number of people that we've got. We also need to amp up our presence in different areas. But I think, yeah, we're just sort of, I don't know, so embracing that vision and around that central point that I think if there is a really good opportunity. So case in point was the Transport for London pilot that we did. So that's now moved on to the point that this year we're starting to roll out around about 100 vending machines. So there'll be one in every 4 platforms across the London TfL estate will have a Healthy Nibbles vending machine in the next 18 months. So, you know, I think that opportunity for us presents itself not only in the enabling healthier choices, but also then the advertising accessibility of a branded machine in those areas where our clients are, our workplace clients. So with everything that we do, we say, right, does it fit within that? And then what's the capacity? What's the workload? Because some workloads are easier than others. Sometimes you can have something that's not really a brilliant payoff. It might seem an exciting experience, but the actual human capacity of that is quite high. So it's kind of, yeah, a constant balancing act.
And how are the snack boxes going? Because I think when we last spoke, part of your pivot was this kind of unexpected opportunity to go direct to consumer, which is something you thought would only happen much further down the line. But you had the opportunity to do it with the corporate clients you're working with, but then also to look at how you could be engaging with consumers directly.
The consumer side is still a work in progress. I would say what I have come to realize with that is just the level of financial investment in marketing for a consumer subscription model. And there are so many subscription models out there where we've seen big brands that have paved the way for what we're doing. But if you then look at the marketing spend and the acquisition costs and the retention element, it's quite draining. So we don't do as much on the B2C. But the volume of boxes that we do is absolutely huge on the corporate, and mostly still to individual homes. And then we've had a kind of middle ground, sidestep, whatever you call. We call it bespoke wholesale, but basically it's almost like a consultative capacity for wholesale into environments. So we've just launched into 180 Health Club, which is the Soho House gym. Yes, with a bespoke range, and we now manage all of the office groups buildings for the amenity trays, and also for Hana, which is a co-working sort of space. So we're basically doing food service within those areas, but it's far more, rather than just sort of giving a catalogue of products, we actually take on board what does their brand represent, what are their clientele, what is their clientele expecting, and then we curate a range to suit. So that's kind of a mid-side step somewhere between a vending machine and a box.
And in terms of what you those products that you're curating and pulling together, I mean, is there a mix of, because I know you support a lot of independent brands and startup brands, which is fantastic, some of which, many of which are women-led, which is music to my ears.
60%.
How do you go about kind of finding those brands and putting together the right mix of products, I guess?
I think it's been a journey. I remember that literally the first few phone calls when I started the business, I would ring up and ask for samples and think, oh my goodness, what are they going to think of me? Because I'd never worked in a product-based business before.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm just asking for free samples. But now I think what we have done is through our sustainability and health basically guidelines and that structure, we've become known that if you can actually get your product into Healthy Nibbles, you are genuinely healthy. And that's starting to get feedback from the supply chain, which is amazing. So now we're in a really fortunate position that we get, I would say, tens of applications every week of different products from all sorts of things, from meal pots to chewing gum to drinks, everything. It's actually really exciting to see the different sort of variety of products that are out there. But that has not come sort of before years of being very, having to go to the shows, see who was presenting, and phone people up for free samples. Yeah.
And get them to trust you, I guess, because
yes.
to have those conversations in the beginning, well, who are you and what is this business? Like
exactly.
To trust you in terms of, I suppose, contracting and sending stock, etc. So that's really interesting. And I think that for me, what's so inspiring about that, just from a consumer perspective, is that I know that with Healthy Nibbles, I can discover brands that ordinarily I might not have been able to find anywhere else. And in that way, you act as a springboard or a platform for some really amazing brands that might not have the capacity to be in the supermarkets or the places that we might ordinarily have come across them.
Absolutely. And I think that's some of the strength in our offering is that the vastness of the product range, and we don't do it just to say, oh, we've got 1,500 products or 1,200 products. We don't do it for that purpose. We do it because ultimately we're meeting such a wide range of people and a wide range of settings that have very, very different requirements. So a sort of prime example, we've just gone into in the last few months into Tesco's distribution centre. So there's a lot of I would say not necessarily minimum wage, but certainly lower entry wage levels in terms of there. So we've got offerings that sit within that sort of pound mark. We've got a purely plant-based vending machine because there's so many more companies that want 100% plant-based. And then we've got obviously the products that have gone into Soho House, Jim, are totally different because their expectation levels is completely different, but also the people accessing that venue have a much higher sort of salary rate and disposable income. So it's just such a wide scope of clientele that we've got in terms of the end customer. So it's about having choice for those people, and just making it really, really relevant, because ultimately if we can get people to go from an unhealthy item to a healthy item, we're making a step in the right direction.
Yeah, well, and also that you are, as you said earlier, have become the sort of trusted source for something that really is healthy.
Yeah.
Because I think as so many of us have discovered, something that says it's healthy often isn't when you read the ingredients. And I suppose there's a certain level of education required when you're reading an ingredients list to know what is actually a sugar but is being called something else.
Yeah,
so I think, yeah, to have that peace of mind that if you know you go to a healthy Nibbles machine, that actually you're getting your endorsement of a healthy product, which is really exciting. So tell us about the sustainability piece, because I know that you've made massive strides in this space over the last 2 years. It would be great to hear a little bit about your approach to that, but also what does that mean for the people that are listening today and anyone that might listen to the recording of this, in terms of the supply chain and their experience?
I think when we did have to a certain degree a little bit more time in our hands when COVID hit, to a certain degree, what I wanted to do was go through the B Corp accreditation, because what I felt was, as I say, we'd started this from a very personal experience in terms of wanting to make an impact in our, shall we say, community, but we felt we were making fairly good headroads, so we'd go for B Corp, and it seemed to be the perfect solution. It's hard work. Yeah. we nearly cried when the plaque arrived. It's got pride of place in the office. Going through that experience definitely took us on a sort of wider perspective of sustainability and impact. So yes, we'd focused on environment, we'd focused on our employees and supply chain, but then it was taking it further. So yes, our employees, we've got a really good package that they can get access to, but actually it takes it further into HR. So every employee has to have a complete 360-degree audit. So that means suppliers, customers, all sorts of people just giving their perspective on your ability to do the job. So it's much wider. So we took 2020 during that time to start our benchmark for carbon emissions. Not the brightest move if I think about it logically, because we're probably going to be going north, sheerly because we're not traveling, or we weren't traveling. So there is going to be that impact. So we did that. We went through our B Corp, and then we set some clear benchmarks. So for instance, we did have some products that had sustainable palm oil in, so we removed all of those. We transitioned all our boxes to plastic free. They're made from recycled materials as well. So they are made from recycled, but then they're fully recyclable at curbside as well. We started to look at more and more suppliers that were using compostable packaging. What it actually means for our end consumers is, you know, that we deal fairly with our suppliers, our customers, our employees, that we have sense checked them. So yes, we have a standard onboarding for our suppliers, but then we've got a second element to that looks at diversity, looks at what they're doing in terms of carbon emissions, looks at what the impact that they're having. And we then are able to project that to our clients, which is really, really good, because they're getting that sort of, I think B Corp has been an incredible achievement for us. Yes, the hard work, I think, paid off, but it definitely helps in that conversation with customers. Just being able to say, I've got a third party sort of seal of approval almost. But I almost feel that B Corp in its itself is seen as a journey, but I actually think it's the start of the journey as well. It's really hard work to get it, but then actually you're on that annual benchmarking, so it's not just a nice to have. I think it validates and prevents against the greenwashing, because actually if anybody said to us, well, what about this, we can go back and say, well, this is it and this is third party evidence, rather than us just saying, oh, it's environmental or it's sustainable or whatever. There's still a long way to go in terms of innovation, things like packaging innovation, to make all of our products essentially compostable with compostable materials. I think there's so many different ways that we could, you know, in terms of us as an individual business, but collectively we need to make some significant headways in various different aspects. But it has been a really good way of sort of demonstrating our difference, I think.
And what advice would you have for somebody who may be considering the B Corp process, or even just making smaller moves within their business towards sustainability? Because I think when you first sort of start making those moves, it's obviously a massively to B Corp certification in terms of everything that needs to be done and the length of time that the process takes.
Yes.
But you know, what advice? Because I think just listening to you, I was thinking about, you know, everything that you've done in terms of packaging. You know, for a lot of people, I think might initially think, oh, we as a business, we can't afford that, or because sustainability is expensive, right? And we all know that from running it. When you first start to, for those that are just starting out, they possibly have the advantage of not having to go and start all over again.
Yeah, reinvent the wheel. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, what advice would you have to someone who maybe has that impression that sustainability, or in order to be sustainable, it's expensive?
Okay, I would first of all look at the quick wins that you can do. So for instance, with B Corp, they've got the BIA, which is the B Corp impact assessment, business impact assessment form, that you can go on and download free of charge and get a really good understanding of the areas that you need to look at. Because for some, like, we were going through quite a challenge, or quite a change in our corporate structure at the time. And we just got rid of an advisory board. And because we were going through the funding round, we were loath to set up a full board until we'd got the lead investor in there, so we can just try and play around with who would be the right board. So we didn't necessarily have that. So we lost marks on that, but we gained massive marks on what we do for employees and supply chain. So I think that is a really good thing to do, as it's free, it's easily accessible, and it gives you a really good understanding of the type of questions you're probably going to get asked, but also where you've got strength and weakness. I would say your carbon emissions is, again, another fairly easy tool. We used compare your footprint, but also if you go on to the government site for BEIS, the business, I think it's energy infrastructure and whatever. I should know that, but because they've actually used it as a case study, so I should be totally okay with that. But if you go onto their website, they've got SME Climate Hub, and what that does is list so many different resources. I would say choose one, always choose one accreditation. You can run after so many and you will tie yourself up in knots in terms of just trying to meet lots of different requirements. So choose the one that is important to you, and then look for just the quick win. So for instance, for us, the packaging was a quick win. We did things like we reused packaging that had come into us, and we put a little note in the card saying this is reused and repurposed. And then we moved to cornstarch pellets. So they just dissolve in water and disappear, which is great. So there's an awful lot that you can do that isn't necessarily costly, but is just a transition in terms of your supplier. But I would definitely start with something like BEIS, compare your footprint, and B Corp as sort of those base levels of free access and of information.
That's really amazing advice, because I think for many businesses that will allow them to sort of develop a roadmap and a timeline maybe of what you were talking about, the quick wins and things they can implement now, but then also map out what they need to do next.
The other thing I would say is evidence everything from day one. So if you are really at the beginning, evidence everything. So all of your contracts, any of your benefits. I'm just trying to think. So things like our reviews of employees, because we're a small team, you're very, and I'm sure we're not the only one out there. You have a lot of face-to-face, you meet your team, you're so close to them. So having a review isn't this massive sort of 3 sheets of paper that comes out and you've got to fill everything in because that's the way the corporate says. So quite often you do things like that and it's quite intuitive. Scrap the intuition, just go for documenting, or at least keep the intuitive approach, but then document everything. Because certainly when you go through these certifications, if it's whether it's B Corp or otherwise, if it's respected, they will require evidence of what you've done. So just start evidencing everything.
I mean, sorry, I think actually that's really good advice in general for a business, because we've done a few workshops with our law partner, Collier Bristow, and that's one of the key things that they keep kind of saying in terms of the fundamentals of your business. Document everything. Make sure you cross your T's, dot your I's from a contracting perspective, agreements, anything like that, because actually it's part of thinking big and preparing yourself for growth. Because in many cases, businesses take off and when they don't expect to, and they don't have that foundation in place, and it can cause massive issues further down the line, from a legal perspective, but also, as you were saying, from accountability and documentation, that if you want to go after accreditations like that, it would be much easier if you had everything in place historically.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes I look at our employment contract and it is something I'd like to change because it's incredibly legal. And I'd like to be sort of very cool like Grace or Deliciously Ella or something, and have a very sort of like, I don't have the time and resources at the moment. But I do think, yeah, it serves us in good stead for any inevitable disagreement. I mean, one of our biggest mistakes that we had was not having the right documentation in play, and it actually cost us some equity. Wow. So you can really fall flat on your face, and we learned and got burnt, and you pick yourself up and you move on. But if you can prevent that from happening to other people, that's definitely the way to go. And anyone that
go ahead.
I was just going to say that anyone, even if they're close to you and friends, or sort of close associates, if they understand business, they'll understand that without getting offended. So you're not going to offend or upset anyone by saying, hey, it's just like, I'm preparing my business, exactly like you've just said, I'm preparing it for growth, this is what needs to be in place. That's it. And they'll understand. And if they don't, they probably don't want them.
Exactly. No, and I think that's really good advice. What other challenges have you had to navigate over the kind of establishment and growth of your business?
I think our biggest one, and I'll still find, I guess I've got some time to play out whether I've made the right decision or not, is we bootstrapped a little bit too long, I think. And I think we should have gone bigger with the investment round at the beginning.
Let's see, that's what I was saying about the meat.
Yeah, so I think we bootstrapped a little bit too long. I think there has been a challenge with certain areas of staff in terms of finding the right expertise. I think we sit in a very weird space, like we're not pure tech, but we've got some tech, and we're not pure product, but we've got some product. So trying to find other people that can come and join that vision, that have got their head in the game sufficiently that they can understand the different elements from coming from a small business. You expect it if you go to, I don't know, like Sainsbury's, where they might have the banking and blah, blah, blah. But for coming from a small business, people don't expect it. So I think projecting that. I also think confidence, which I think, women are terrible at, or a lot of women are terrible at. And I think year on year, I'm sort of growing in confidence in terms of who I am in the business, who I am external to that, but what the business means to me, and actually the worth that we've got as a business and what we're doing. And the other one, juggling everything, because as the vision grows, there's always these growing pains that are sort of constant. And I don't expect, even as I said, we're just going through the funding round, I don't expect it to change when we get the money, because there's going to be new new challenges, in as much as we're a team of 10, we're aiming to be about a team of 90 to 100 in the next 18 months.
Wow.
So that suggests another different type of growing pain. So just get used to the journey. Ish. Shake yourself down every time it goes wrong.
Well, but I mean, I think, you know, you've certainly shown over the last few years just how adaptable and agile you are. So I think that you will take this growth in your stride, absolutely. But it's interesting to hear what you said about confidence. And we've actually just had a question. Christine's asked if you feel you might have had a degree of imposter syndrome, which is something that a lot of founders of women-led businesses suffer from. Would you identify it as that?
100% all the time and every day. In fact, I've just started the Goldman Sachs program. I got in there and think, I shouldn't be here yet. What am I doing here? But I think it's every single day. And I don't think, speaking very, shall we say, very personally and real right now, but the VC world needs a kick up the backside to stop trying to facilitate that imposter syndrome and manipulate women into either reduced valuations or you're inefficient at what you do. I've had some really strong positive VC conversations, but I've had some horrific ones in the last 2 months. And you just think, just a minute, who are you to make a judgment on what I'm doing in my business and I am doing it right? And knowing that, but the amount of times, I mean, my emotional roller coaster, if it's tracked, I'm glad that's the only one that the fitness apps don't track. It's probably like all the time. But yeah. I think there is. I mean, I still look at even doing things like this, you think, yeah, I have started this business and built it, but I'm nowhere near there yet. And it's a constant. I don't think it ever goes away. And I'm not sure it does. I'm not sure if it's the woman who, and I've forgotten her name, and I shouldn't have forgotten her name, who used to be the CEO of Pepsi, just said she used to take a daily dose of confidence in the morning. And I think even if you can obviously see her growth track record, and she's still saying that. So does it ever go away? I'm not certain it does, but we'll see.
Maybe we just keep putting higher and higher expectations upon ourselves.
There is that. I mean, that's something I've been doing on this reflective thing with Goldman Sachs. What's your biggest challenge? And I think entrepreneurialism, I think you are typically driven by some form of perfectionism, excellence, and it's a very fine line between the two. But then when you achieve something, so what's the next thing to achieve? So like we started out with a health food and a vending machine, that wasn't enough. We then got it to where we are, but where's that going to take us later? And I don't expect it to just stay in its little box. And then what do you do if you have other ideas? And yeah.
But then these are the people like you who innovate and make changes to the way that we live our lives and we consume and so I think, and the fact that you're doing it in such a responsible way is very inspiring. So yeah, I've seen it with the women's chapter and our members, that is a very common trait, this never settling, and whatever you achieve, there's always something else to move on to. But then we're very fortunate to have people like you and them that are the ones that are really making the world a better place for all of us, particularly in terms of our work-life balance, our health, and all of the tech that underpins that, so that we can be making really informed choices. So if you ever need a dose of confidence, just send me a WhatsApp.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes, and I think that's what's so important about communities, and I'm sure that you're finding that with the different programs that you've been on, is that we need other people to lift us up and remind us actually how far we've come.
I think that's it, and I do think there is an element of trying to reflect on what you've done, because then you can see your achievements. A couple of years ago, I moved to a certain planner that I use on a day-to-day, and it's got, at the end of each week, it's got sort of what were your big three, what worked, what didn't work, then what are you projecting into your personal business and social life that for the following week. And I do find that quite useful, because that's a way of sort of tracking off your key three goals. So you can always say that you've got sort of weekly, quarterly and monthly and yearly goals. So you can kind of look at that and sort of get that sort of, yes, you have done something, but I do think it is important to remind yourself that of what you've actually achieved. And I'm never particularly very good at that. Even when we win awards or we do things, it's kind of like, right, that was the awards night, that's over with. Now what you know, what challenge is facing us the next day? So you don't stop enough to actually reflect. But I think it's sort of, that's almost par for the course. So I'm kind of happy with where it's at, because I don't think I'm going to be able to change it anytime soon.
It's inherent.
Absolutely.
Well, I would just at this point invite anyone who's got questions to pop them into the chat, so that we will make sure that we've got time to chat about them. Sarah, before we move on from the sustainability, can you tell us about being invited to COP? Because that must have been a massive accolade for you as a founder and as a business.
It was so good. So we got approached by an agency that was dealing with Soho House, which is where they carry out all the bilateral agreements and essentially network and have conversations. And they said they saw us as making sort of moves in the industry in terms of food service, being health and sustainable, and could we put the vending machine out there? We literally got a 10-day notice period. So it was quite, oh my goodness. But it was really, really positive to have that association with various different sort of bodies and people see what we were doing, but also that we'd actually been recognized externally as the impact that we're doing, because we do, I think because we're innovating so much, we kind of fell out of that sort of vending space, shall we say, because traditionally that industry is still not moving a great deal apart from a couple of people. So I think to be recognized totally externally in terms of you're providing sustainable, high impact food service, that was kind of where they were heading. So that was really good for us just to have that, and to sit and listen to some of the conversations as well. So that was good.
Did you want to stand next to the machine and say, this is my machine?
Absolutely. It was a bit sort of like, here we go. But we're actually, through the same group, we're being involved in a B Corp pop-up shop in central London next month. Wow. Where the machine will be focused as well. So it's really good just to start essentially just demonstrating our commitment and what we're doing in terms of B Corp, and making, it's not just about the B Corp itself, it's about the sustainable, making an impact, I think. And we've all got a long way to go, and the only way we can do it is by every facet of all these different businesses adopting this approach, because then it directly impacts consumption patterns and what we're actually doing. So yeah, it's good.
Before we close off, I would like to ask you a quick fire round of questions. You don't have to, you're not allowed to think about the answers too much. It has to be the first thing that comes to mind. What would you say is your biggest fear?
Not being successful, failing.
And what does failure look like to you? Is that not being successful?
Would be if I close a business. Yes. I think anything less than excellence. I'm a really hard driver, both on myself and the team in that sense. That's excellence.
And who or what inspires you?
I think I'm inspired by people that are changing the narrative around anything that they're doing, whether it's, you know, one of the fellow women chapters, so Amanda Thompson doing Thompson and Scott, changing that narrative around alcohol free, beauty, so people like Shantakai, where they're changing the narrative around sort of sustainable, impactful makeup brands. I think it's just anyone that's actually making a day-to-day effort in what they're trying to do, whether it's bringing communities together or whether it's actually impacting the world more positively. So there's a lot of different people, but yeah, anything that's sort of noteworthy, I guess.
Yeah, and lots of women. I mean, because
yeah,
all
there
of those
is,
are women-led brands.
There's an awful lot of women.
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
What's the most courageous thing you've done?
Moved to Kenya after 3 weeks. Wow. With 3 weeks notice. I went on holiday, came back, and we decided to go, so we sold everything and moved back.
Wow. And yeah. What was that driven by? Just the desire for a life change, or?
Yeah, so I got married very, very young, 19th birthday. and always wanted to move away. And my husband didn't want to move anywhere, was quite happy where he was. And my parents have various charitable things going on in Kenya. We went out to see it, and on the plane back he goes, why don't we go to Kenya? I was like, done. So we literally we were in a rented house anyway, so we put a for sale, all the contents for sale in the village. My mum and dad were sort of like heartily praying that nothing would sell, and the first two people that arrived had just arrived in the area and cleared us out of our entire kitchen, our entire bedroom, so we barely had anything to go with. So 3 weeks after landing back from a holiday, we were back in there living there.
Wow,
it's great fun. 10 years in Kenya, wouldn't change it for the world. It was beautiful.
Well, we're very glad to have you back here.
Yeah. And I guess
you can always visit. What is your guiltless pleasure?
Still chocolate. Chocolate and shoes.
Oh yeah, shoes. I can identify with shoes.
Definitely. And makeup, copious amounts of makeup.
We could have a whole event just talking about that, I think. Shoes, makeup, and chocolate. And do you have a mantra that you live by?
Really about, I guess it's just shooting for excellence. I just really feel that I should be pushing forward, because if I'm doing it in excellence, then I'm doing the best that I can do. And we're delivering the best that we can deliver.
Amazing. Thank you.
No worries.
Have a look and see if we've had any questions. I don't think we have, which is great, because it means that everyone, through our conversation, we would have answered a lot of the questions. Is there anything that you want to add or tell us about that I might not have touched on?
No, I think we've covered all the sort of, the main points. But I think if anyone wants to reach out, if they're going through that sustainability, do so, just get in touch. I'm more than happy to sort of spare some time and point anyone in the right direction in a more relevant way.
Brilliant. That's really helpful, especially considering how much you have going on. So that's really very generous of you. Thank you very much, Sara. Well, I think we've come to the end. For those of you that did join us today, this will be recorded, so you'll be sent a link afterwards. We just tidy it up a little bit. And then it'll also be uploaded to our website, where all of our other event recordings are, so that there is literally a whole page of inspiration, talking to amazing people like Sara about their business journeys, their growth, but also getting a little insight into you and what drives you. So thank you so much for being so honest and sharing that with us today. I'm incredibly grateful. And I'm looking forward to seeing you more now that we're doing more in-person events and the world's returning to some sort of new normal, fingers crossed. Hopefully we'll get to have more in-person interactions as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. It's been our honor. The pleasure's been ours. So thank you very much.
No worries. And
if anyone would like to get in touch with Sara, they have an amazing website. Please go and have a look at all of the different channels that you can, on their different touch points, but also through their contact us button. I'm sure that you'll be able to be connected with Sara, and otherwise Instagram as well. I think
it's fine. It's just, and if anyone wants to email, it's just Sara@healthynibbles.co.uk. So feel free.
Brilliant.
No worries.
Great. What I might do with the follow-up email is I'll put you on copy, so if anyone wants to get in touch with you, they can.
Yeah, that's great. Not a problem at
all.
All right.
Thank you so much, Sara. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.